Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about Chapter 5, the integumentary system. So this is your first organ system, and usually most people start getting excited about anatomy and physiology at this point, since we're now getting into more interesting things versus looking at just cells. Though the integumentary system is composed of cells, it's still more exciting. So the integumentary system is the most obvious organ system that we have. It's the first organ system people come in contact with. It's your skin, your mucous membranes that are associated with the skin, your hair, your nails, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, ceremonious glands. All of these are part of the integumentary system. It is your largest organ system, and it has a lot of functions. Most people think of the skin as a protective barrier, which it is. It protects us from UV radiation, from burns, from pathogens, but it does a lot of other things as well, including vitamin D regulation, so it helps us in producing vitamin D. Vitamin D is needed for strong, healthy bones. So without vitamin D, we can't absorb as much calcium. And it also functions in thermoregulation. So I love this little cartoon. I have the URL for the cartoon up here. Don't bother me, I'm having a bad hair day. It's the first thing you see on an individual is their integument. So when you have patients coming into the hospital, to the ER, wherever you're dealing with your patients, it's the skin that you're going to see first, and it can tell you a lot about your patient before they say anything. The skin has multiple layers, so technically it's only 2 layers, epidermis and dermis, but we always talk about the hypodermis even though it's not actually a part of the integumentary system. It's what attaches our skin to, or our integument to underlying organs, and it provides protective barrier as well. So the epidermis is this top layer, and it's composed of stratified squamous epithelium. So it's this top layer. It is a dry membrane. It's also known as that cutaneous membrane. Then we have the dermal layer. The dermal layer has 2 different regions. We have this upper region here called the papillary layer. And then we have a lower region, the majority is the lower region, which is known as the reticular layer. The papillary layer contains or is composed of areolar connective tissue. If you remember from last chapter, we talked about areolar connective tissue being the basement membrane of all epithelium. Well, that includes your epidermis. The epidermis is epithelium, so you have to have that basement membrane to provide nutrients for the epithelium. Then we have the deeper layer composed of mainly dense irregular connective tissue, which has collagen fibers laying in multiple planes, so we have multiple planes of protection from stress, from mechanical stressors. And our skin is constantly under mechanical stress. Think about the clothes we put on, take off, bumping into people. So there's a lot of mechanical stressors that are always occurring. In that reticular layer, we also have a lot of other tissue types. So we have nervous tissue, we have muscle tissue. Over here you can see some of the nerves that provide either touch, deep touch, pressure sensations. We have nerves coming up here to the areolar region, providing light pressure, light touch sensations. We have nerves providing innervation to the smooth muscle here. This is the rector pili muscle that controls hair follicles. There's glandular tissue, which is more epithelium, and of course there's going to be areolar connective tissue. So there's sebaceous glands. Here we have sudoriferous glands, blood vessels that innervate to provide nutrients as well as to bring heat to the surface of the skin. And then the lowest layer is the hypodermis, and that is composed predominantly of adipose connective tissue, but it also does have some areolar connective tissue in it as well. So the epidermis is composed of stratified squamous epithelium. The basal layer, the lowest layer of the epidermis, consists of living cells, living epithelial cells. But as the cells move away from that basal region, the lower region, they die. They get keratinized. So keratin is a protein, and as keratin fills the cell, it basically causes the cells, organelles, and nucleus to just degrade. And so as they move up into the upper regions, the cells are all dead. And so at the very top, the cells that you see on your skin, these are all dead cells that make up the upper region of your skin. That's also known as the stratum corneum. Have you ever, and this is a weird thing, but have you ever seen someone like take a needle and they put it through their skin and they're like, look at me, I have a needle in my skin, and they don't get hurt? It's because they're putting it through that most superficial layer. And when you do that, you're not hitting any living cells. If you go too deep, you're going to hit living cells, and you're probably going to bleed as well. Because it's epithelium, it has no blood vessels. Epithelium has no blood vessels. It's avascular. So it depends on the areolar connective tissue, which is the basement membrane, to provide nutrients. So the lowest layers are the ones that gain the nutrients and can undergo mitosis, cell division. And there are some nerve endings that innervate the epidermis to allow us to have sense of touch. So these are the layers of the epidermis. I was talking about this basal layer down here. The stratum basal is this lowest layer of epithelium, and it consists of all living cells. There are a lot of different types of cells that we have. We have nervous innervated cells called Merkel cells. We have melanocyte cells. We have the epithelial cells, and we have, which I don't think I see in this drawing, we have the stem cells that produce new epithelial cells that will constantly undergo division to produce new epithelium. And these epithelial cells here are living and have nutrients, so they're going to undergo mitosis, moving us into the stratum spinosum. The stratum spinosum is the next layer of cells. The stratum spinosum is where you're going to get a lot, or where you're going to find the cells start to fill up with keratin. So these cells are still living, but they're going to eventually die off as they move from the lowest layer of the spinosum to the upper layer of the spinosum. So once you hit the stratum granulosum, the cells die. Here they have little granules. These granules are basically a precursor keratin, and at this point the organelles and the nucleus are going to degrade. In thick skin, we have a stratum lucidium. Stratum lucidium is a layer that's only found in thick skin, so palms of your hands, soles of your feet, digits, so I shouldn't say digits, the tips of your fingers are where you have thick skin. Thick skin is going to protect you from extra stressors. And the rest of our body, like the dorsum of the palm, you're going to just see thin skin, and that only has the basal spinosum, granulosum, and then we move on to the corneum. The stratum corneum is also all dead epithelial cells. And the stratum corneum is constantly flaking off. So approximately every month we have a brand new skin. So just like if you've ever seen snakes shed, they take all their skin off at once. Spiders, when they get rid of their skin to grow, they get their entire exoskeleton off, and then they have a new one underneath. We shed continuously. Every day, constantly, we're shedding skin cells. Actually, the majority of the dust that you see is skin that has been shed from your body or from other people that are around you. And because of this, we're always producing new cells at that basal region and bringing those cells up. Okay? So the types of cells that we find in skin, which I've already mentioned, but I'll show them again, are stem cells, which produce keratinocytes. Keratinocytes, which are the most common cells that produce keratin. Melanocytes that produce melanin. Tactile cells that detect changes in pressure. So Merkel cells are your tactile cells. And then we have dendritic cells that are your macrophages of the integumentary system. Oh, I didn't. I want to quickly mention a couple things. Macrophages, or the dendritic cells, are typically seen in the stratum spinosum layer, and they are fixed in that layer, and as materials move through, those dendritic cells are going to attack and send signals for the immune system to also become activated. I'll talk about melanocytes a little bit later, so that's all I really wanted to mention on this slide. I just want to make sure I got that down. Okay, so there's a lot of variations within the epidermis from one individual to another individual and from one body region to another body region on the same individual. So your skin can vary in thickness, it varies in color, and in skin markings. These are three very different variations. So thickness. This is your figure from your textbook that shows the difference between thick and thin skin. Thin skin is going to have one less layer of epithelium. Thick skin is going to have that stratum lucidium layer as well. And so it's thicker in, well, depth. The function of thick skin is to protect. So you're going to find thick skin in areas of the body that are constantly under stress, which is the soles of your feet, the palms of your hand. So your hands are constantly working, pulling things, writing, possibly being used to crawl on the ground. The soles of your feet are constantly being used to walk. So you're always putting stress and pressure on them, so they need that extra thick layer of skin. Some differences between thick and thin skin. I got this picture from here. I like it because it shows all the layers of the thin skin and all the layers of the thick skin, and shows the difference in each region of skin. So stratum corneum is much thinner here than it is there. You have that stratum lucidium as well. Spinosum is still one of the thickest layers in both sides. And with thick skin, some of the things that you will see that differ from thin skin is that thick skin never has hair follicles. There's no hair follicles ever found on the palms of your hand, on the anterior digits of your hand, or on the soles of your feet. You have, so associated with your hair follicles are sebaceous glands. There are no sebaceous glands that are going to secrete oils. So you don't have oily hands or oily feet. There are sweat glands, though, and that's what is typically left when you leave fingerprints and stuff. It's the sweat that causes you to be able to leave that fingerprint. It's not oil. something interesting. So variations also can be in skin color. So one of those variations is associated with hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a protein found in blood, in red blood cells. It actually produces that red coloration. So the more oxygen you have, the brighter red the blood cells will be, and the more red you'll see. And so if your blood vessels are dilated in your skin, typically seen in individuals who have been exercising, and that's what this picture's from, an individual exercising. I got this from Google Images. I just looked up individual exercising, and that was a good picture. Their blood vessels dilate to allow blood to move to the surface to release the heat. And so that moving to the surface is what causes your face, your skin to flush. The opposite will occur if you are in a cold environment. So in that instant, you're going to have blood stay away from the surface of the skin and keep the heat in the torso, in the area of the body that will keep you alive. And that's going to cause you to become very pale in color. And then we have melanin. Melanin is produced from melanocytes. There are different types of melanin that can be produced. And so melanin itself is a pigment that gives our skin its typical color. The two types of melanin are eumelanin and pheomelanin. Eumelanin is the darker pigmented melanin. Pheomelanin is the lighter pigmented melanin. The melanin from the melanocytes is transported to your keratinocytes that move from that basal layer all the way up to that corneum layer. And so the factors that influence melanin production are going to be your genetics, will determine if you have eumelanin or pheomelanin, and the amount of sun exposure or UV light exposure that you come in contact with. So more UV light, more melanin production. And the reason for that is melanin is a natural sunblock. So we have sunblock built into our body. That doesn't mean that you don't use sunblock. You need to use sunblock when you're going out into the sun so that you can protect yourself from burns. But we do have a natural sunblock, and that's that melanin. The darker eumelanin is very protective against the sun's UV radiation. The pheomelanin is not as protective, but it still does have some protections. The difference or the reasons why we have these variations is because as individuals moved northern from that equator line, the sun became less of an issue. The UV radiation became less of an issue. But we need UV radiation to produce vitamin D. And so as we moved away from that equator, we had less UV radiation, and the darker eumelanin was protecting us so well that we weren't able to produce the vitamin D that we needed. And so individuals started losing that darker pigment and gaining this lighter pigment so that they could then get enough of the UV radiation to produce the vitamin D that they needed. And with that, we end up with this range of skin color variations from very dark to very, very pale. And we'll be watching a video on skin coloration from melanin. It's a fabulous video. We'll do that in a lab, so you'll get to see that as well. Last couple of things we'll talk about are skin structures, so different physical differences within one region of your skin to another region of your skin, and one of those changes is mole formation. So a mole is an accumulation of melanocytes. Oftentimes, and I would say actually the majority of the time moles are benign. So all of these are benign moles, and they have different structures. Each of them do. Moles can become cancerous or become melanomas, though. And so anytime you have a mole, you want to watch it and make sure that it's not changing in structure or tenderness. Okay. Another change that we have is associated with melanin is vitiligo. Vitiligo is a depigmentation of the body. And so typically you have normal, you have whatever your skin color is all throughout the body, and then with vitiligo, regions of the body become unpigmented. So here you have hair that is white. The rest of the hair is that darker brown color. And the skin has become very, very pale here, where the rest of the skin is much more tan. Another melanin disorder is albinism. So this is a disorder where you cannot produce melanin. So this is a recessive genetic disorder. So you have to have two alleles for this disorder. And it causes you to not be able to produce melanin. I do have a video that I'm going to play you that is very fascinating. If for some reason it's not playing properly in my presentation, then pause the presentation, copy and paste the link, and then go to it, okay? And then come back to me, of course. I want you to listen to my lecture still.
Your team writes too many emails to count. Grammarly Business makes
Our groundbreaking story about children born with albinism touched millions of you and generated a flood of concern.
In a culture where beauty can determine everything from who loves you to who hires you, what hope do these children have for a normal life? Tonight you'll see as Juju Chang brings us an amazing new chapter in the lives of people born too light.
My name is Kenyon Flowers. I'm 10 years old, and I live in Illinois. And I'm his twin brother, Kari.
You can just imagine the great surprise that met Kenyon and Kari's birth. They are fraternal twins, born only 25 minutes apart. But Kenyon has albinism, so in many ways, it separates him from his brother by an eternity.
Is it good? Is it what you got?
My family's skin color, probably like chocolate. For me, when people say what color are you, I say banana and vanilla mixed. Bavella.
Would you ever want to be brown?
I don't know if I look good in brown. I don't really know.
Kenyon says he remembers clearly the first time he noticed the vanilla chocolate difference between him and his family.
I was with my mom when she was carrying me. I saw my arm. Like, I was holding on to her.
And what'd you think?
Wow.
A typical response when anyone sees Kenyon with his family for the first time. Because of his albinism, Kenyon's body produces little or no pigment in the skin, eyes, and hair. Two recessive genes are the culprits, one from each parent. Albinism cuts across the animal kingdom, and in humans is found in every ethnicity in every corner of the world. For the Flowers family, they're constantly reminded that one of them is not quite like the others.
When Kenyon, I think he was maybe 2, we were in a store and he picked up a toy he wanted. I said, no toys. I put it back. There was an older lady shopping, watching me. And then I see security coming. And this lady's like, this black man's trying to take this little white boy outside. The security guy come up, he's like, put the little boy down. I'm like, this is my son. Well, you got proof it's your son. No, that's my wife, there's my other son. You touch me, you leave me alone, or I'm gonna tear this whole store apart.
When people ask questions like, are you really his brother? It makes me feel obnoxious. I'm like, oh, I don't think I want to answer to that. Because I am his brother. Just that I'm lighter and they don't understand it.
I heard people call him albino, a freak, idiot, retard, all kind of names. When I hear those names, I just fight back and say, what happens if you were him?
In spite of their differences, or perhaps because of them, Kenyon and Kari have a unique bond.
Hey! He's awesome, cool, big brother to have, and most of all, he's the best.
Kenyon and I are like as close as glue on paper. Sometimes I think he's the second part of my heart.
At just 10 years old, these boys have already learned about the importance of looks and the shortage of tolerance. Kenyon's albinism does set him apart from most 10-year-olds because he's legally blind.
I kind of wish I could see better, because I can't see people from far away, because I think they just disappeared.
Kari has become his brother's keeper because of it.
Usually when he follows me to the park, I have to watch him in the street, and also when he's at school crying, I had to go see what's wrong, and then whoever hurt his feelings, here comes me.
Kenyon is the first student with albinism to ever attend his elementary school.
Who knows how to spell Lundahl now?
To help things along, the school purchased special equipment to help him see the material.
Make sure you indent all of your work, your very first sentence.
He also has an aide by his side the whole day to make sure he absorbs the lesson plan. Altogether, there are 8 specialists who work with Kenyon over the course of a week. But once recess comes around, the divide between the Flowers brothers becomes more dramatic. Kari, the athlete, is outside playing football. Kenyon's vision makes sports tough, so he and his friends have completely different plans. Lunch bunch.
It's a thing where we just talk, and it's like more quieter than there. It's just sometimes where we talk. It's like professional. We eat lunch together.
Professional with food.
Fun.
What are we going to talk about?
The most popular topic these days? Kenyon's racial identity.
About albinism, have you ever, what have you said to them? Why are you white instead of black? What have you, said to them?
It's because I have albinism. I can tell you about it, but just don't call me white again, because I am not. I'm black. Some people call me pale, which I'm not.
And I know with you, Kenyon, you may look like white, but almost like if you look in a shadow and at your skin, it might almost look like a little bit, almost like a regular person's skin a bit.
He's a regular person.
Finding acceptance with friends is hard, but there's something else Kenyon finds even more challenging.
Having a love life for me, it's hard. Really hard.
10 years old child.
I like girls. They said, I don't like you, I just like you as a friend. Maybe they just think I'm not cute enough, which I am, but they just don't see it. They rather see some guy who's big, gigantic, strong, who plays football, instead of just, a kid with albinism and takes taekwondo. It's really heartbreaking.
All right.
Our groundbreaking story about children born with albinism.
I am going to finish my lecture and the next, or in another PowerPoint video that I make. So I will stop here, and I will see you guys a little bit later. Have a great day. Bye.